Hi guys, my name is Roryn. As proof that I am a giant nerd, that is actually the name of my favorite D&D character. One of my friends and I can actually get together and play. He is either a pyromaniacal egomaniac or an egomaniacal pyromaniac. I'm never quite sure which one it is. I was going to actually introduce myself since this is my first AMA, but I figured I'd just say a couple quick things and then get into the questions. For one thing, if you want to know a little bit about me, you can go to my profile and read my spotlight there. I wrote an article for Fitocracy that was posted there as well, and so is my album, which is not safe for work, especially if you're a heterosexual male. One other thing that I'd like to say, I'm allergic to practically everything, including this, and as I just found out, masonite, which should not be surprising since I'm sure it's made from trees and I'm allergic to all of those. And also wearing shirts, much to my neighbor's dismay or delight, depending on your point of view. So that said, I'll get into the questions. Cass Lee had the first one, and it says, if you could have the ultimate cheat day, like The Rock level, what would you eat, and would it involve potatoes? I would eat a lot of bacon, a lot of french fries, so yes, potatoes are involved. Hamburgers, pizza, ice cream, tiramisu, and lots of cheesecake. Hey Isha asks, what would you rather be, a crow or a deer? This one's really easy. I mean, come on, who wants to be a deer? It's a prey animal. Crow, you can fly everywhere, you're smart. Pyramid Head asks, woodchuck hard cider, great alcoholic beverage or the greatest alcoholic beverage? For those of you that don't know, Pyramid Head is a raging alcoholic, and I make fun of him about it all the time. He's also very short, so in your dealings with him, make sure you mention that. It is a great alcoholic beverage. I do enjoy woodchuck, however, it's far from the greatest alcoholic beverage, which you would know if you could pull yourself out of your Pabst Blue Ribbon long enough to try some real beer. Cheshire asks, describe a situation where you became aware that your internal self-image differed drastically from how other people perceived you. I think I'm going to answer this twice, actually. The first in terms of fitness, because this is a fitness website. And in my head, and I mention this pretty regularly, I'm still a very, very painfully skinny nerd. I'm still, like 140 pounds in my head. Now I'm about 35 or 40 pounds heavier than that, and I have been nearly 50 pounds heavier than that, fairly recently, actually. And occasionally, people that I don't get to see very often will come up to me and say something about, you've obviously been hitting the weights, or things along those lines. And most recently, we just got back from camping with my family on the western shores of Michigan. And I had ridden my motorcycle up there, and the rest of the family caravanned up there in their cars, and I beat my parents there. And when they pulled into the campground, I had already taken my motorcycle gear off and was walking over to greet them, and my mother did not recognize me. She told me later that my dad said, oh, here comes Brian. I was the only person walking down the road, and she said she looked right at me and didn't realize that that was me, because I had gotten quite a bit bigger than she really remembers me. So obviously my mother still thinks of me as a skinny little nerd as well. And then in a professional sense, I recently took a leadership course that work sent me to, and that included a lot of feedback from peers and subordinates and superiors. And it was very interesting getting feedback from them that had to do with perceptions on your strengths and weaknesses. And I found that in a lot of places where I felt that personally I was kind of deficient, that most of the people that I work with felt were actually strong points for me. Like, I don't personally feel that I'm very good at dealing with people in general. I tend to have very little patience for incompetence and things like that. And apparently my coworkers, that just doesn't come across to them, so that was a pleasant surprise. Haisha's got another one in here, since I made mention of my inability to tolerate small fluffy animals. On a scale of 1 to Kristen Bell, how would you react if presented with a baby sloth? And I'd have to say that I would be one notch below Kristen Bell, because I don't think I'd actually cry. But that's pretty much the only difference. Ziafet asks, favorite TV doctor? House, the doctor, Marcus Welby, or B.J. Honeycutt, and why? Also, if the doctor, which one? Well, despite being a giant nerd, I have never actually watched any Doctor Who, so it can't be the doctor. And Marcus Welby is a little bit before my time. I actually had to look that one up. I had no idea who it was. I did know who B.J. Honeycutt was, because I used to watch MASH all the time with my parents when I was younger, especially my dad. But this is definitely House. I love House. I wish it was still on, although the series ended wonderfully in my opinion. And I wish that all doctors were like House, because frankly I'd much rather have an asshole doctor who was always right than one with a great bedside manner who was basically just bumbling around guessing. Savulu Calls asks, how did you and your beautiful wife meet? Who made the first move and how? As further proof that I am a giant nerd, my wife and I met on an AOL message board many, many years ago, closing on 15 years ago now, that was dedicated to discussing the then unreleased Star Wars prequels. It was called Discuss the Prequels. And as to who made the first move, I guess that depends on how you define that. As I recall, she offered to bake me cookies, and I said, well, they would probably get stale in the mail, and that's how we discovered that we actually lived quite close together. And I'm not sure how much longer it was after that before we met for the first time, but I broke up with my previous girlfriend and met my now wife shortly thereafter. Something Clever asks, you awake alone in a locked vault. Several safety deposit boxes are open around you with their contents or what remains of them scattered. There's a bag you don't recognize with tools and a handgun. You're wearing gloves. Knowing your own history, what's the most likely explanation that accounts for all of the data? The gloves would most likely be motorcycle gloves, and I would guess that the rest of this is just owing to my bad luck of being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being taken hostage or framed or something along those lines. Xenoang asks, and this is actually one of the top 5 questions for the week, but since one of the founders of Fitocracy asked it, I'm going to give him credit. What's your favorite pastime outside of working out? This is very easy for me. I'm a huge reader. I go nowhere without my Nook. And before I got that, I would carry book or books everywhere with me. I'm a huge fantasy fan, so I read a lot of that if I'm just reading for simple pleasure. But I do read pretty much anything. I love military history, military technology books. I like some philosophy books, things like, I have The Tao of Pooh and The Day of Piglet. They're some of my favorite books. The Art of War, Book of Five Rings, things like that. And I also like regular fiction as well, or fiction that deals with military themes, so like Tom Clancy, things along those lines. Kelsey Voigt asks, if you were awarded a fully funded trip anywhere, where would you go and why? If somebody else was paying for it, I would love to go back to Japan. I was sent there about 10 years ago for work. I lived there for about 8 months, and I really loved it there, but it is crazy expensive, and I really could not afford to live there on my own unless I got a huge raise, which is probably not going to happen anymore. Dave89RR asks, how long did it take you to get to your current weight? This is a bit of a journey. As my current profile picture shows, I was very, very skinny for a very long time. When I graduated high school, I weighed probably about 115 pounds, 120 pounds maybe on the outside. And I worked stock for a while, my first job, and that put a little bit of weight on me. But even so, when I was in Japan 10 years ago, I weighed about $130. That's the first picture in the upper left corner of my profile picture. I stayed very skinny for a very long time. The picture in the upper right-hand corner is from Halloween 2011, which is not all that long ago now, and I weighed about a whopping 145. That was after a couple years of messing around with a Bowflex, I'm ashamed to say, which did put a little bit of muscle on me, but certainly not much. And then the picture in the bottom left is bulk that I did over last winter, and that picture was taken at 183 pounds. I actually made it nearly to 190 before I decided that none of my pants fit and it annoyed me enough to stop and start cutting again. And now I'm back down around 175, maybe 180, depending on when I weigh myself. So really, I gained the majority of that weight in the last year and a half, 18 months, give or take. Yours truly, 49, who I call Guppy, that goes way back to beta days now, asked 3 questions actually. She listed them as 6, but 4 of them were the same question. When will you post more pictures of your dragon butt? Dragon butt is my sobriquet. It goes back to when Fitocracy was still in beta, and there was a fairly active group of us that had a quest for the epic ass going on. And I happened to take my pictures in a pair of boxer briefs that I have that have a dragon on the left hip. And people were quite enamored of this, and so everybody that was part of that group started calling me Dragon Butt or DB, and it kind of stuck and spread beyond that group, and in fact now is my Fitocracy title. But to answer your question, I don't know. You can only really see the dragon from one angle, and that's kind of played out. I was rudely interrupted by a telephone call, so please enjoy this interlude brought to you by Foreigner. Since I was so rudely interrupted by the Detroit Opera House, who insists on calling me instead of my wife to solicit me to buy tickets, I'm going to have to pick up on the last question where I left off. I was answering Guppy, yours truly, 49. She asked when would we see more pictures of my dragon butt. The answer is, I don't know. You can only see the dragon on those particular shorts from one angle, so that's kind of played out. But if someone were to find me some new dragon shorts, then who knows? Her next question was, why are you and Miss Dana so awesome? Miss Dana is my wife. She's also on Fitocracy. And I don't really know. I guess I'd have to say that we both never really grew up, particularly when we were together. And I think people really appreciate the fact that we don't take ourselves very seriously at all. And I hope that that makes us fun to be around, to hang out with. And then her last question, if you were stuck in a doorless, windowless room with 2 angry pandas, what would your course of action be? I would hug them and squeeze them and call them George. Blizztacular asks, what do I do with these strap things? In Toronto, the Toronto meetup this past January, I had gotten some free EFTS wrist straps, and I brought them with me figuring I'd give them to somebody at the meetup. And Blizztacular happened to have a great deadlifting day that day. She set a PR, I believe, at 205 pounds that particular day. She's since beyond that. And so I thought that was an excellent reason to give them to her. So she has them, but really that's not what they're for. They're actually an anti-theft device, you know, kind of like those handcuffs that you see attached to briefcases. Put it around your wrist, wrap the handle around or wrap it around the handle of your purse, and then you don't have to worry about anybody purse snatching. But I'm reasonably sure that you could either run down and or kill anybody who tried to steal your purse, so you may have to find another use for them, like Romanian deadlifts or heavy shrugs. LTG asks, what do you do that helps you stay motivated? This is actually one of the top 5 questions. Motivation for me has never really been a problem. I've always been self-motivated, and I've always been a work before play kind of person. I always get my responsibilities done first before I sit down and read or play a video game or what have you. And I kind of carry that over into the gym. Once I decided that I was going to do this, I just do it. And it doesn't really matter if I'm not, having a great day, if I don't particularly feel like lifting, I just go and do so. I don't necessarily listen to any particular music or anything like that. So I guess the motivation for me is just I want to get stronger, I want to look sexier. I do appreciate it when my wife makes some comments about how good I look or how good a portion of me looks. Not that she didn't think I looked good before, but I think it's growing on her. Curb Stomp's question of the week was, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? And Haisha's answer to this was teleportation, but I think I'd actually rather just be able to fly, for partially the same reason, just to get from point A to point B. And I just think that that would be really cool. I suppose you could kind of do that with teleportation as well, but I think pretty much everybody would enjoy being able to fly. That's like the classic dream that everybody has. Miss Chatterbox's question was, least favorite exercise or lift that you're still willing to do despite hating it. Originally when I read this, all I saw was lift, and for me that would be the bench press. I suck at it. I'm getting better at it, but I really don't like it. But I still do it. I'm not even really sure why, because the bench press to me has no practical application, unlike deadlifts or squats or even overhead pressing. But I still do it. But since I just noticed that it actually does exercise, then definitely running. I fucking hate running. I don't really like doing any kind of cardio. I mean, I'll tolerate like going for a bike ride, especially if my wife and I are going to ride somewhere, something like that, or I'll go swimming for a while. But I don't usually do those. If I'm going to do cardio, I do usually go running, and typically it's because I'm getting ready for an adventure run. I've done a couple of them now. I really like them, and I'm going to continue doing them. But I even just ran this past Sunday for no good reason, and that kind of worries me. And then the last one from Jimaholic85, what is the #1 thing on your bucket list? And I think for me, this would probably be a nice long trip, land and sea in Europe. I'd love to like start with a Nordic cruise in northern Europe, and then visit Ireland and Scotland and Spain and see castles and travel through Europe, and then hop on another boat in the Mediterranean and come back and spend like a month or two doing it. So that's it for me. If you guys have more questions, I'd love to do this again. So hit me up.